educated me quite a bit, particularly on Dash, happens to be our guest today. Joël Valenzuela. Joel Valenzuela is the editor of Dash Force News. He's a veteran writer and journalist in the cryptocurrency space, having written for Cointelegraph and the Dash Times, as well as for his personal site, The Desert Links. He attended George Wythe University for undergraduate studies in statesmanship and postgraduate studies in global affairs at the University of Buckingham. He previously had a long professional history in politics, having worked for organizations such as the Cato Institute and the White House under George Bush. Joel Valenzuela, welcome to the Vin Armani Show.
Hey, Vin, thanks for having me on.
Hey, dude, great to see you. I'm having these audio issues again. So let's talk a little bit. I don't know if you were watching earlier. We showed a clip from your CNN interview that they did of you in Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and you were talking about your. We didn't show all of it in terms of sort of your origin story, but I think that it's pretty awesome. You shared it with me the first time that we met. You got to. It's cool how you got to Dash. Can you talk a little bit about, because there's a lot of Bitcoiners in my sort of sphere who have some. Let's say some who give me hell. Let's put it like that. I think that's maybe the easiest way to do it.
Believe me, I'm on Twitter. I've seen some of it.
Right, because I'm not totally against Dash. And one of the reasons I'm not totally against Dash, one, I didn't know enough to be against Dash, but two, because part of it is because of your origin story. Could you tell us a little bit about your experience as one of the very few people out there who has had the guts to really try living exclusively on cryptocurrency? Can you tell us the story of your journey in that regard?
Yeah, sure. I'm going back to the bats for Batman and how his parents died and all that.
Right.
The oft-repeated origin story. Yes, so I've been a proponent of liberty and libertarian principles for just about as long as I can remember. And I used to try to struggle on that front in more like the political and think tank, the war of ideas, and to a lesser extent politics. And pretty soon my impatient mind told me that this is not a very efficient way of getting there, especially since there's this giant well-funded behemoth that all it can do is just print money out of thin air, steal value from everyone else, and just keep funding everything, and then you're just hopelessly outmatched. So I was always a big precious metals kind of guy for that very reason, because I really valued the idea of being able to keep your own value, right? Being able to not have a currency that's controlled by what has proved a lot of times to be a hostile entity. So in 2013, I decided to move to New Hampshire as part of the Free State Project to just try to actually live with the most radical experiment of freedom, to try to just not so much play nice and just see what I can get through with the politicos, but just do everything I can. And as part of that, first I heard they were doing this thing called Bitcoin, and it was like digital gold, and you didn't need any permission and to use it. And so I got some and started using it, and I got about 10-15 bucks in exchange for a part of a pizza in 2013. And then by the end of the year, the price went crazy, and it was that whole price down.
Yeah.
After the big pump that I was earning Bitcoin and spending it at every single opportunity, because the thought process is it's very linear. Just money is power. Do you want to encourage a free money, so it's a tool of power for free people, or do you want to encourage something that is a tool of enslavement? And so I, of course, chose the former. And so ever since 2013, I've been basically, I don't think I ever bought Bitcoin or crypto that I could think of. Or if it was like a very small amount at some point. I almost always worked for it in exchange for, I always got paid in exchange for work, like some of the Plan B Bitcoin flyers that I did some copywriting on, for example, in the early days, and just local business transactions, anything else. And then about late 2015, I decided I was going to make only Bitcoin, because I thought, hey, people say that this is be your own bank, that this is something that's going to actually work. And so I said, oh, I'm going to try it. Why not? So then early 2016, I closed my bank account and said, I'm just going to go all Bitcoin. I'm going to just really live hardcore. late 2016, it got really hard to do that because transaction fees and transaction times are going up. I tried to like buy a gift card to go buy something, and it would be standing around for an hour or so waiting for a confirmation to be able to use it. There was one time I tried to get lunch, and it turns out that the time it took that one confirmation was the time that took my phone to die, and so I just had to skip lunch that day. And just like all these kinds of like real problems when like a lot of people started to have a problem with Bitcoin as a peer-to-peer electronic cash system much later than I did, because they honestly weren't using it like in a real world environment. Even
Right.
some of the more common users were paying online invoices and sending large amounts and things like that, and they could eat a $40 transaction fee on like a $100,000 transfer or something, but not this whole buying coffee type thing. So that's when I hit that brick wall of, okay, I failed. I tried something. It worked for a while, and now it doesn't work. What do I do? Do I give up, or do I try to keep going? So I said, I'm going to try to keep going. Then I just literally went down the list. Okay, Bitcoin doesn't work. What else can I do? What else can I spend as money? What else actually makes sense? I just went down the list, and the only other option at that time was Dash. The only other thing that I could even pretend to live off of, the only thing I could get easy conversion to other things, the only thing that I could pay some bills in, the only thing that still worked as a currency. And so that's one of those things.
This is
Yes.
before the fork. This is before Bitcoin
Yes.
Cash. So you've got a choice of Bitcoin or just you're looking through the list at this point. You're living off Bitcoin BTC. It's not working. You're going down through the list, and you come to Dash. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I just wanted to
No
make sure
problem.
that the chronology was clear there.
Yes, that's exactly correct. And it wasn't even that Bitcoin was, at that point, Dash was the only thing that worked, because Bitcoin was going through scaling problems, and they were only getting worse all the time. And there was, Litecoin was still an abandoned project at that time. There was no, which is one of the fun facts about Dash. Dash was originally forked from Litecoin back in 2014, but soon became a Bitcoin fork instead, because no one was actively developing on Litecoin back then.
Mm.
And the whole, well, let's just try to pay for stuff in Litecoin stuff didn't happen until later in 2017, by the time I'd already settled on Dash. Bitcoin wasn't working. Bitcoin Cash was like 8-9 months from existing. Like there was nothing in those long months, and so this was really my only option.
So you come to Dash. You start out using it as just a cryptocurrency. How much research did you do into the structure of Dash, or did you just sort of jump into it as like, oh, I can actually use it? And so you say you were using it. Were there as many merchants? So you were obviously dealing with merchants. Were there as many merchants at that time taking Dash as we're taking BTC? Like, or was there some ramp up that you had to do with merchants?
There was a little ramp up. What really helped at that point is there were a couple of cryptocurrency debit cards that took Dash directly, did
Oh,
not go through Shapeshift or whatever at that point. And of course, that's crypto debit card scene has gotten really rough lately, which, is kind of the entire point behind crypto, right? Because
right.
these kinds of centralized systems fail. But so there was a couple of those things, a couple bill pay systems. There was a service called Bitcart that at the time allowed you to buy Amazon gift cards with Dash for a 20% discount, and then later 15. There was a few things, and then a lot of these local merchants that were just accepting cryptocurrency directly into wallets. All they had to do is just download a multi-coin wallet and start doing that instead. So it was pretty easy in the beginning, and there was a time when a lot of people in the Free State community, which has been basically the forefront of actual cryptocurrency
Hmm.
as far as for currency. Um, some of us might forget that Roger Ver heard about Bitcoin on Free Talk Live, on Key New Hampshire based show Free Talk Live, from Ian and Mark, some of my friends. And it's kind of that thing. The Free State community came together, the cryptocurrency community, and said, all right, Bitcoin's not working. This is just not, what are we going to do? And so it was basically a Ethereum versus Dash kind of debate. And it was like 2/3 towards Dash, 1/3 towards Ethereum. And Ethereum was just the natural choice because it can send and receive, and it was the number 2 option out there.
Right.
But obviously, I didn't care for Ethereum very much for a cash purpose because that's not really what it was ever meant to be. And now Ethereum has its own scaling issues. So pretty much now Dash is the one. It's the economic cryptocurrency right now that's used for economic transactions. Once in a while, you have other ones that are used for novelty purposes more just because you have a fan of that. But it's pretty dominant in that. And so that's really what caused me to go over. But that's like the main thing is it's the thing. Obviously, I've been looking into Dash. I've been writing for Cointelegraph for a while. I knew about a bunch of different currencies. I thought Dash was just like a privacy focused thing. Then I heard some, oh, it's good for merchants and stuff. And I'm like, oh, it sounds like that other that Netherlands coin that does the same thing. And oh, I'm also interested in national based cryptocurrencies like Aurora coin. Maybe they get to be adopted first in their local areas and stuff. I was always looking at stuff in the back of my head, but it was just at that point when I had to find somewhere to go that I started really looking into it. And it really helped because in 2013, when I moved to New Hampshire, my roommate at the time was Amanda B. Johnson, who ended up being a Dash spokesperson for about a year. And so she was also talking about Dash on her crypto agnostic show, the Daily Decrypt, before then. And I was looking into that. I said, oh, this sounds cool. This sounds the block reward, the separation between miners and masternodes and a treasury. That sounds very, very interesting and thorough. And of course, I remember when Mike Hearn's big article came out about why he said Bitcoin was doomed, and then I did not understand it at that time. I thought, oh man, he's just being hyperbolic, he's just salty or whatever. And now I think he's exactly right. It's so all that in the back of the head just kind of said, well, let me try this for a while because this is the only way I can live. And so then it becomes harder, that choice it's funny because that was like, there was a very little in terms of options then. There was like, after Bitcoin didn't work, it was like, can you take a gamble with Ethereum to see if that's going to be used as a payment system, or you want to do Dash? That was it. Now there's so many more options, but the choice is a way easier choice towards Dash today, in my opinion.
So yeah, I wanna go over this because it's something that we had been talking about today. There was a lot of talk in a recent sort of I won't call it a back and forth per se with Craig Wright, but certainly with different factions of Bitcoin Cash that I had, where it seems like there's a feeling within the Bitcoin Cash community. I think that this is also true within the Bitcoin BTC community. And it's a question of who are the stakeholders, right? Like there's everybody has this different sort of definition of who has skin in the game. And I think that you're talking about, it seems to me that it's like miners, devs in Bitcoin. That's all anybody thinks about. And I think that it's mainly because they're not seeing sort of what we're seeing here on the ground. They're not seeing what you saw as someone where it's like, hey, if this network is no longer valuable or no longer stable or loses a level of utility and I can no longer use it as currency, I don't eat. Right? Like,
yeah,
like you just said, I don't eat. Whether I eat or not depends on the stability and the value of the network that I'm on. To me, that sounds like a stakeholder. That sounds like someone who's got a hell of a stake.
And that's one thing that people don't exactly get, because there's this weird, it's not quite directly articulated, but I've noticed this weird, not very economically thinking idea of that you can be completely impartial, or you should be impartial when talking about cryptocurrency, things like that. And I mean, there's a lot of people who just say, I'm a random person on Twitter, I'm talking this and that, I'm not a shill, I don't work for anyone. But you have no idea what that person's holding, what that person's motivations are, and what kind of crazy stuff they might propagate without any kind of recourse, with any kind of consequence, just either on a whim or, because of a conflict of interest. And then you got people like, for example, I don't have a bank account. I make all my income in Dash. I basically have a little bit of fiat in my pocket just in case I have to like gas up at one spot that's not one of those gas stations where I can buy the gift cards with Dash or whatever. But I mean, pretty much I'm like all in. My career is based around, I work for Dash. I like, how much more if I was just trying to like, if I didn't believe in this, right? If I didn't think that this was the best option towards a free financial world right now, why the hell wouldn't I be working for like something else? Why wouldn't I be like half my stuff and I'm gonna hedge a little bit into Bitcoin Cash? I'm gonna like, hoard some XRP tokens or like whatever it is. That's a very strong kind of statement because if this doesn't work out, um, I'm kind of screwed. And that's the thing that a lot of people with I've it kind of it's funny to see like a lot of people going towards hanging around something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash because of a sort of nostalgia value of this is the great technology that changed the world. It shook the world. Everything else came from this, and I'm kind of nostalgically bound to try to see a Bitcoin succeed.
Mm.
And I completely I completely understand that sentiment, and it's not lost in me either. The difference is when you have to like have a life or death thing. Like I couldn't wait around for the scaling debate to be solved or for a hard fork or whatever. I had to move or something else would happen. And then now it's like everyone gets so tribal about this sort of thing. And I definitely encourage people to actually try to use every single
Yes.
thing that they say they believe in. It's
Yes.
so easy to talk about stuff. Put some actual skin in the game. Some of the skin in the game is investment, but some of the skin in the game is time, reputation, and actually inexorably tying your life to a project like this. That's how you know if you understand it or not.
Well, then that's when your economic incentives are aligned to actually understand it. That's when it actually matters. Like one of the things to me that's very difficult is, I mean, I've built a business, but I've also, I mean, look, I moved my whole life out to New Hampshire for the most part, primarily because I want to be involved in this space. I love this space. I'm like you, that I believe that this is the greatest tool for human freedom that's come along in hundreds of years, and I want to be a help to moving it forward. I believe that I actually have a chance to do some good in the world, and this is the vehicle to do it. So I come here, I move here. But what's interesting is that that is really the choice at the end of the day, isn't it? Like, and what you're saying is that the choice that you have, if you're a user, if you're an app developer, if you're a merchant, you don't have a choice in what decisions the miners make, in what decisions a particular dev team makes. So yeah, I don't have a choice in the decision that Blockstream makes. The only choice I really have is, because since it's a free market, is there a competitor? And can I move to that competitor? And then I have the choice of how soon I choose to do that.
Yeah, and that's kind of
Go ahead.
that's a difficult choice to have. It doesn't give you very much agency if you think about it.
Hmm.
It just I use this tool because it works, and the people in charge of making it work, i.e., the miners that basically run the thing and the developers that basically make the thing, I have no agency with them at all. If they decide to do things in their economic best interests that are not in mine, I'm kind of out of luck. Like I could, if I like Satoshi's just on his hoard alone, just on the investment alone, could probably crash the Bitcoin market, probably do some stuff like that, but can't really force the miners, the developers to do anything. Really has Satoshi's kind of powerless at this point. If you
Hmm.
just talk about the the actual investment. And that is a scary thing for a business owner or for a collection of investors, that you're going to throw all your money into something that you hope works. And if it doesn't, well, you just got to kind of cut your losses and start over something else. That's a really scary thing. So you work your whole life, make all these risks, maybe burn a few relationships along the way,
Hmm.
maybe get a couple extra gray hairs, maybe miss once in a lifetime opportunities because you have a dream of building up your business and it works around some technology that may not work forever. In fact, you have just absolutely no recourse if it doesn't. Who are you going to sue? Who are you going to fire? Who are you going to do whatever? You can't really have any agency. And I think that's why a lot of more long-term investment minded people have gotten into dashes, because you precisely can do that. You can actually vote with your digital dollars. You can, there is a mechanism for literally firing the core team and replacing them, or just firing the leadership. There are things you can do. And then here we have Bitcoin that has been helpless to really do anything about that. And then there's been a schism, and now Bitcoin Cash is its own thing. And I still get the feeling that Bitcoin Cash is in the process of feeling out what do you do with that lack of agency. How do you get agency if the new people who forked away from the old thing, what if the new leadership decides to do something crazy? And what happens if it ruins your business model? What can you do other than, complain about it or threaten to leave for another coin?
So I think that that's a great jumping off point, right? Because I think that what we've basically laid out here is whether it was sort of whether this was a completely planned out or whether it was intuited, it seems that this is the situation that Evan Duffield, who is the person who, what would you call him, the creator of Dash?
Dash
What does he call
founder.
himself?
Let's just call it that.
Okay, creator of Dash. That it appears when you look at the way that Dash is built as opposed to the way that Bitcoin is built, or what I would say is, since it is a Bitcoin clone, initially a Litecoin clone, which is a Bitcoin clone, right? That it's like it's Bitcoin plus, right? So it's Bitcoin.
Well, there is a Bitcoin Plus, so don't
Okay,
don't make that mistake.
it's Bitcoin with some additional things that I would say that, at least whether they do it or not, the intention is to give agency to individuals outside of the miners, that to hopefully protect the network, perhaps to grow the network. Can you talk to us a little bit about what you understand about why Evan Duffield was interested in creating this sort of model? What was it that he was trying to solve? And then if you could maybe, in the course of that, describe for us, what is this model? What does it look like from a structural standpoint?
Yeah, so from having met and talked to Evan a few times, he's one of those like next level thinking people that sometimes it's hard to have a conversation with because he answers it by predicting the future and you're just trying to ask him what he wants for lunch. But one of his initial reason for going to Dash is he goes to the Bitcoin core team and says, "This is an amazing thing you got right here. It has a problem with privacy right now. You can trace transactions and de-anonymize people, and I want to help you out with it." And they basically told him to go kick rocks. So he said, "All right, I'm gonna go make Dash." At that point, for like a week, it was called X Coin until they realized it was a stupid name, and then called it Dark Coin for about a year. And so then it comes to the problem of, okay, how are we going to fund development for this privacy focused coin? Well, we have this Dash Foundation, kind of Bitcoin Foundation like, but much smaller scale. It's not working out. What if we did a portion of the block reward, 10% of all new coins created, towards development? But what if we don't give it to the development team? What if we put it up to a vote that anyone who wants to vote, any stakeholder who is heavily invested in the network, gets to vote where those funds come from? Because then, other than that, you end up with a single point of failure, which is still the development team. They just don't have the outside influence problem that Blockstream had, but they still have a problem of, hey, we're the guys that make the decision. You can't get rid of us if we suck. And so that's kind of how it ended up with. Miners get 45% of the block reward. Master nodes, which are people that are paid to run specialized nodes for extra functionality on the network and who have to prove that they own 1,000 Dash in order to run one, they get 45%. And then there's that 10% remaining. And for most of the coin's history, that 10% has been exclusively towards development. And now the price has gone a lot higher than it used to be. There's room for other kinds of projects. And so just having that voting mechanism of, it's really interesting because I've always been a fan of the idea of the Nakamoto consensus of, if you put some stupid code out there, the miners don't want to run it, and then too bad. You have
Right.
to get the miners to actually run
Right.
it. The problem is, it's like the question of how stupid. Well, if it gets really stupid, then someone's going to say, you know what? I'm not going to run the code that the core team is coming up with. This is stupid. But what happens if it's just kind of stupid? And you're like, well, we don't like it. We don't like replace by fee. We don't really like it, but it's not going to change too much, and we don't want to rock the boat too much. And eventually you just go down this rabbit hole of like, well, I don't think SegWit's what we need, but, they worked so hard on it, and it will keep the community together, keep a hard fork from happening. So why don't we just, and you end up in that, and then finally it becomes a boiling point where it becomes a hard split. And what happens before you get to that point? Well, with the Dash Masternode network, anyone with skin in the game For example, if you're a one person who has 1,000 Dash, if you're one person who has 10,000 Dash or more, if you're 1,000 people with one Dash and you decide to come together to run a node, you actually have a vote. And there's a lot of large businesses that have worked with Dash that now run master nodes, and now they are part of the network, and they get to say if something bad happens that would threaten their business, they get to actually vote on where that money goes from. They get to prove consensus. They get to just say all the economic actors in this ecosystem vote this way. So if you push code that doesn't jive with that, you know where your investors are going to go. And then also what that vote does, of course, is that you can just defund the core team or defund any project, including myself, defund anything, and then give it to someone else. And because we're in such a weird world where we're in a bridge between this decentralized autonomous organization that is Dash and the meat space, the real world of governments and laws and things like that, there's a New Zealand-based trust that is illegal, that allows the masternode entity, the masternode network, to legally own property without ever identifying who is or isn't a masternode or providing any barrier to that. And the Dash core team is legally owned by that. So if the masternodes want to vote to say, because there's the unfortunate problem, like what happens if the core team is there, they own all like the social media accounts, they control the GitHub and the code, all this kind of stuff. If you want to defund them, you can pay a new team, but you lose a whole lot in the process. You have to just say, oh, those guys aren't officially anymore. Here's a masternode vote that says it. Here's the new guys. But they got to spin up their own social media accounts. They got to sort of start from scratch on some of the code. They got to do all kinds of stuff. But there is a legal process that the network can just vote and say, these are the new guys. Transfer all property to them, and there's an actual like structure to it. So it's not like, that's the one thing like people like to say with cryptocurrency, that it's all free. It's open source, multiple implementations. Oh, it's going to work out great. Then there's always the practice, which is, well, the Bitcoin core team kind of sat around, got funded by an outside company, and a lot of people agree and disagree and whatever, and then they're just kind of there to stay. What do you do if you want Bitcoin to be something else? Well, they're kind of really entrenched, and they've held on to that for very long. And I'm sure the Dash core team could do the exact same thing, even if they get defunded. It's a lot easier, but it would still be pretty entrenched. But now there's like an actual legal mechanism to get out of that. So what you see here is you see a big preliminary way of acting on your economic self-interest. You can actually vote with your dollars, right? Vote with your digital dollars. And if all else fails, there's still always the Nakamoto consensus for the nuclear option at the end, which is the only reason we have something like Bitcoin Cash now, is because that thing worked in the end. And what made me confident, but as I said before, there was like almost a year between Bitcoin not working for me anymore and there being a Bitcoin Cash, and I just could not wait that long. And that's one of the things that makes me much more confident to have a lot of my stake in terms of how I choose to live my life in Dash, because there is something that holders can do about it way before you actually end up going for a chain split.
So, one other thing that I've noticed about Dash, and maybe this is just the nature of when you create a system like that, that's that sort of system when you have a number of proposals that are up to be funded. It seems that it naturally engenders a great need for communication, not just among the stakeholders, but it seems like the stakeholders, the masternode owners who are willing to at least be pseudonymous online, are engaging with the overall community of users to try to sort of figure out how they should vote. It's almost, it seems to me I was thinking about this the other day. Because I've been thinking, okay, well, what am I going to talk to Joel about on the show? And luckily, this week has been interesting to talk about these sorts of things, because it does seem like the Bitcoin model and the pure Nakamoto consensus model is very much a sort of a governance model that is very Game of Thrones in many ways, right? That it's like every miner trying to get to 51% or more of the network to get the maximum amount of profit. How do we play this between each other, having their influence on the protocol developers at that level? Whereas it seems like Dash, although perhaps it wasn't necessarily meant to be that, in some ways is shaking out as very similar in structure to kind of what the founding fathers of the United States may have envisioned in terms of different bodies that have a level of checks and balances. Has that, you know, come across to you as being something
Yes,
remarkable that's emergent out of Dash?
I've thought about that a bunch of times, and one thing we cannot ignore, and this is like, I guess I'd qualify as a libertarian anarchist,
Mm-hmm.
anarcho-capitalist, whatever, but you can't get to that point. You can't love freedom without liking small freedom rather than no freedom. And you cannot, we got to this impressive, amazing point in human history through the development of uh, constitutional republics and systems like that. Small government, right?
Mm-hmm.
Small government is a big improvement on no government, extreme government. And so the American governmental model pretty much worked better than anything else for a long time, despite still being having room for things like owning people or
Right, right,
war or just all kinds of horrific things that has enabled. It's still got us to the point where we actually can care about that. Because before it's just like, how am I going to eat? How am I going to survive? And so the human race has really leapt forward very quickly because of the relative freedom provided by that kind of system. And a lot of the problems with that have been that it's still been a trusted system.
right.
It's been trusted and involuntary. It's been involuntary in that you just a social contract. You sign it, you're born, sorry,
Right.
you have to live by it. And then there's it's trusted because laws do not enforce themselves. You have to have people in fancy uniforms go over and hit you over the head with a stick if they aren't enforced, or decide not to, or hit you over the head for a non-law to enforce a non-law or whatever. However that shakes out. And so decentralized governance is very interesting because it's voluntary governance. No one has to participate in the Dash ecosystem. No one has to use it. No one has to try to be a stakeholder. Anyone can exit at any time, go to
And
anything
anyone
else.
could fork it. Anyone could fork
Yeah,
it if they wanted to.
anyone can just make like, you know, make Bitcoin Dash. Oh, this
Right.
is like more true than Satoshi, and it doesn't do all this other nonsense. I'm gonna just fork it, and people have, um, I don't know if there's, I don't know how many actual forks of Dash there are. I'm pretty sure PivX was a fork of Dash, although please feel free to correct me if I was wrong. I know it's a similar model, but there have been a bunch of different forks of that main idea, and anyone can do that. And then the other thing is the trustless nature of the governance system, in that if enough masternodes vote 10%, a net 10% vote for a proposal, it will go through. And if a net 10% don't vote for it, it will not go through. And that you cannot change that. If there's not enough room in the budget, something can pass and then there's not enough funding to go to it, so it doesn't get funded. But for example, if I have this great idea and I say, hey, I want to start a competing development team, not to replace the core team, but to work alongside it, just so that we have like two different implementations of Dash, and the core team hates it, but enough masternodes like it, I can just take half their money because literally it just comes, it gets created and just gets zapped right to my wallet. There's no, you don't have to wait for the government to like audit themselves. You don't have to trust anyone to uphold the law. It happens. So it's a massive improvement over the system, but it's still, you find these similarities not because I don't think anyone's paying attention specifically to the constitutional republic kind of system, but I just think a lot of this happens to be a natural
Right.
way of effectively organizing. And on that note, there is something that's coming out in a few months where right now to run a masternode, you have a key, right? And that proves collateral, proves you own those funds. And then you use that to start your masternode and use that to vote. One key for everything. But they're coming out with something in the 12.4 version that will split that key into 3, so that you can have be a masternode owner, you can have the collateral key, but then you give a separate key to someone who runs the node for you, actually does the work itself, runs the actual node that you're paid for. And then there's a third voting key. And that thing I'm really interested in, because that means you can delegate voting rights as a masternode owner. That's starting to sound a lot like representative government now.
Right. Right.
Except the difference is you can also not delegate. You can have 10 nodes, say, if you're a big rich guy, and you get 10 or more nodes, and you can just hold the voting keys yourself to all of those and just, I'm going to vote, I'm going to show up and vote for myself. Or you could be someone who says, I still have a full-time job, I got kids, I don't have enough time to go through all these proposals, I'm not qualified to judge what makes a good development proposal, what a good budget is. I'm not qualified for any of this, but I know a guy who is, and I'm going to give him my voting key. And of course, I can still revoke it and if I want to, but I can just give him the voting key, and then he makes smart decisions in my stead.
Oh, this is
and so now we're seeing that build up, and it's pretty cool stuff.
I mean, that concept is so interesting, because you could imagine that it potentially opens up a market for individuals who they're like, I'm going to give you my voting key, and I'm going to give you, some percentage of, the reward that comes into me, and what you're going to do on my...
You'll be able to do protocol level as well. You don't have to wait for them to pay you. You will be able to split the master rewards, just come straight out and split in too.
Oh, see, that's so then what you have is you potentially have a market for individuals who all they do is study Dash, study the market, try to figure out study the proposals and try to figure out which one of these is going to move us forward and which one is not, potentially creating computer models, doing this. I have said that it opens up a whole entire space for stakeholders, and it opens up a space for, it's why I find it so fascinating. Now, I'm somebody who I develop close to the metal, and so maybe that's a good place for us to say sort of like where I diverge. I'm fascinated very much by the governance model. And I think that that's an interesting thing, and I think that it's something that makes Dash unique, and I love hearing about it, I love learning about it, and seeing where it goes. However, I don't develop on Dash at the moment, right? I mean, you've seen a few things that I've done, but I haven't put too many things out in the public, although I'm deciding, right? But I like to work close to the metal. And close to the metal, Bitcoin Cash and Dash are almost the same as each other right now. They've got, well, except for the confirmation times, whereas Dash is 2.5-minute confirmation time, Bitcoin Cash is 10-minute, but they both have 1 Satoshi per byte fees. For the most part, both networks have very good, at this point, very good zero confirmation, which is something we were talking about earlier. So merchants can use it even now. So for me, when I look at it, and I've said that those are really the two things: zero conf, the ability for me to feel confident that if I see it on the blockchain, I can let the person walk out with goods. So important for merchants. And at the same time that I can turn around and immediately spend it, even though it's just sitting in the mempool. Both Bitcoin Cash and Dash have that capability close to the metal. So for me, that's when I look at it, I'm like, well, there's only two that have that, and that makes Cash. Now, you and I have talked about, and this week some of the issues were that there are some decisions that some miners could make in the near future, and some decisions that they have announced they're going to make that could affect the zero conf, the ability for merchants to feel confident that Bitcoin Cash received on their point of sale was good to go without any confirmations or instantly. That's worrisome to me, and I expressed it in the first hour of the show. Dash still has zero conf. I know that I did a video. A lot of Dash people came and were like, "You're attacking Dash." Wasn't making a video to attack Dash. Was actually making
in the bunch, but whatever.
Yeah, I was actually making a video to say, "Hey, Bitcoin Cash, if you go down this route, you might have this problem magnified." It's an outlier issue on block cipher. I don't know, maybe you said it might have even been changed, but it was an outlier issue. I was just making a demo. Dash is safe. Dash is safe for zero conf. I just want to say that straight up. But what was interesting about the people that came back and said, "Oh, that's not true. You should have mentioned, and perhaps I should have, and perhaps I'll put it in the notes of that video, that Dash is already working on this, because it's not necessarily zero conf that's important to a merchant. What's important to a merchant is that the instant that they can feel confident that the instant they get this, just like with Visa, just like with me handing them cash, that it's going to stay in their account." Can you talk a little bit about, so we know zero conf works, but Dash is also doing instant send and some other things. Can you talk a little bit about this functionality that this masternode system also is seeming to enable?
Yeah, so Instant Send, which has been around for about 3 years now, uh, is a system whereby masternodes lock the inputs of a transaction until they've received 5 on-blockchain confirmations. And I mean, it's really that just that simple. And if you try to send an instant send transaction, you pay 10 times the fee, which right now is like a penny total. It's like, nothing insane. And those inputs cannot be moved for 5 confirmations. They're locked until you can't then send it on to somewhere else. You can't double spend. It's just completely secure against double spends. And as an interesting side effect of this, there's a function in Dash Network called masternode block filtering, which causes masternodes to reject blocks that have any kind of conflict with an instant send lock, meaning that it can effectively protect against a 51% attack for the duration of that lock. Of course, if you have a 51% attack, you probably have enough hash power to be able to go beyond that, in which case you're still kind of screwed, which is why 51% attacks are always going to be a thing until it's discussion for another day, I'm sure. But the point is that it actually locks those inputs so you can be absolutely sure. So you don't have to trust. And here we go into the trustlessness of a system. Right now, there's about 2,000 Bitcoin Cash nodes right now.
There might be less than that. There might be less, but it's somewhere around that. Yeah.
Yeah. So when you're sending a zero confirmation transaction on any network, but let's just say Bitcoin Cash for the sake of argument, because a lot of other coins aren't. I mean, it's throwing some shade here, but aren't evolved enough to care about zero conf, which they should be. But let's just say someone can spin up a whole bunch of extra nodes relatively easily that do not have the strictest forms of querying that the other ones do. And then that all of a sudden makes it even easier. In fact, this is a problem that was been talked about a long time ago. In fact, there's a Bitcoin Talk post from 2010 where you have Satoshi himself just talking about using Bitcoin for a vending machine, for like a snack machine, and then talk about, well, zero conf can be secure. Can you double spend? And so he's talking about a lot of the ways that Bitcoin Cash has been mitigating the problem. And then you have Member Llama, who I apologize for not being too up on the lore, if that's someone important or not, but just saying that this is a good start, but still not impermeable. And it's talking about, it really just boils down to a majority of IPs. And he says, which sort of thing brings us back to the main novel idea of Bitcoin. Truth is voted on by computing power, not IP.
That's right.
So you can have this kind of an issue right now. Right now, if you're double spending on the Bitcoin Cash network, you are trusting that there's enough nodes out there that are behaving the right way, and you're trusting that the merchant software is behaving the right way. And whether or not that's a good thing to trust, it's still something you have to trust, and they have to trust you to not try to double spend it. And in saying this in a merchant adoption today, this is not really a problem.
Right.
Not really. I mean, how many times are you going to go up to a merchant and just be like, here, I'm going to buy my sandwich. You're one of the 5 places in town, to be generous, right, that takes Bitcoin Cash. And I'm going to buy my sandwich, and then by the time you walk out, there's not going to be a confirmation anyway. Or by the time you walk out, maybe there is, and you come back again, you're like, hey, your thing didn't come through last time. It just didn't work. Right. And then all of a sudden, oh, whoa, you're kind of in trouble. Like it's probably not, people aren't going to use this. But if you use zero conf for an online thing or a vending machine especially, that's where you run into some problems. But so largely this isn't too much of a problem, but it boils down to, you have to trust people. Now, with BlockCypher, the block explorer that's used in a lot of Dash merchant services, of course, they say that BlockCypher provides data so that merchants know when transactions are risky. Accepting zero confirmations has a risk, as shown in our Explorer. In the example, I believe that the example is your video.
Yep.
The transaction shows only an 8% probability of confirming through our confidence factor API. Merchants use our data to inform merchants of risk. Using this data, merchants do not accept transactions with zero confirmations or a low confidence score. So there are products and systems in there that to sort of mitigate that thing. But as a user, as a merchant who wants to accept Dash, What if you don't have that? What if you have AnyPay,
Right.
which is a Dash point of sale system? It's also a Bitcoin Cash. Probably, to be honest, probably the best Bitcoin Cash point of sale system
It's
out
pretty
there right
good. I've
now. I
used it
know
quite a bit.
BitPay has a couple issues with that, but it accepts zero conf because Bitcoin Cash doesn't have instant send, and accepts zero conf for Dash, and accepts Dash instant send. And so you have something like that where you might be like, oh, I'll just pay, and then the merchant doesn't know if they are secure in receiving the funds. They don't necessarily, they just trust. They have to trust. And the thing with instant send is the only thing you have to trust is Dash, which is what a trustless system or relatively trustless system should be like. The only thing you have to trust is this thing actually works, and since the code's all open source, etc., you can actually verify how does this work. And so with instant send, any user who's using Dash can send an instantly settled or as good as instantly permanently settled transaction and just be confident. They don't have to check if how many nodes are behaving the right way. They don't have to check if there's a Sybil attack that's being attempted at that moment. They don't have to know what service the merchant's using. The merchant, more importantly, doesn't need to know what service they're using. It just works. And that's kind of the big game changer, because cryptocurrency is extremely experimental still. 9 years after Bitcoin came out, this is still very like nerdy kind of experimental stuff. And that's one reason why a lot of merchants don't want to deal with it. I've ran into some pain points with merchants around here who just like, oh, the app isn't working, or like I sent it and it didn't broadcast right away, and then just there's always like some little hiccup, or the Wi-Fi is kind of off, or there's always something, and it's always makes people a lot more risk averse. And so this kind of thing, this very simple little checkbox, which you can, as a merchant terminal, you can just have a little checkbox that does a little flag at the end of the address that says and IS equals 1. It requests specifically an instant send transaction, and you can do stuff like that back end to where if you send a normal transaction, it can see received unconfirmed. But if you send instant send, it says confirmed right away.
Right.
And so there's extra stuff on that. But if you just say, hey, are you using that instant send thingy? Oh yeah, I am. And then you can just trust it. And that goes back to something I wrote about this last Sunday. I wrote about how systems with cryptocurrencies with no governance system aren't entirely trustless. And this includes Bitcoin and includes Bitcoin Cash at this point in time. I don't know how the evolution, still a pretty new project. I don't know how the evolution is going to work long term on this. But basically, with zero conf, you're trusting that the miners won't do something stupid. You're trusting that there will be enough nodes that are strictly querying. You're trusting that there are the right kind of merchant solutions everywhere you go. You're also trusting that the development teams will not become centralized, become taken over by something like Blockstream, won't like hoard the code repository. You're trusting a few things. And of course, it's a little bit of a stretch to call a trustless system trusted, but the problem is running something like Bitcoin or Bitcoin Cash is pretty trustless. But the creation of the code, of course, you had to trust Satoshi did it okay, and then you verified, and then there you go. Now it's a trustless system. But every time there's some kind of modification to that, you have to kind of trust the people to do that. And now, if you have an actual governance model of some kind, that you can have a say in this whole thing. You're not like, oh, I love how Cointext works. It's just great, and ZeroConf works great, and all of a sudden they're like, oh, well, there might be room in some of the blocks for, does transactions with zero fees, and all of a sudden that might cause a massive double spend risk. And or someone just spun up an extra 1,000, 2,000 nodes, 3,000 nodes, and is just attacking the network now, or rather is just making it easier to double spend, or some merchant solution becomes wildly popular that does not use strict querying methods. And now all of a sudden you kind of have a little bit of a trust problem.
So this, I think that this is an issue that it's important to me. Clearly, I mean, it's something that is my business is built on, and as I start rolling out these merchant solutions, which we're doing this year, it's going to be very important. I'd love to have you back on. I'm assuming I'm going to see you at PorcFest, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
You have a ticket?
Ticket? Yeah, I'm speaking 2 days. I know you are
Well,
too.
that's good.
Dash is
Yeah,
the Dash is
I'll
the
be
main
speaking as well.
Dash is the main sponsor, right? It's one of the main sponsors.
Hmm.
And for people who are interested in actually trying out cryptocurrency, pretty much everybody there who's selling anything is going to be taking Dash. So
Yes,
that's good.
and in fact, the number two sponsor is AnyPay.
Oh, so there you go.
So, which is AnyPay is right now funded by the Dash network. They were kind of a crypto agnostic point of sale
Sure.
system, but recently they got something funded to improve the point of sale system and do some Dash specific things like Dash back. So
Right.
if you go to PorkFest, you spend like $10 in Dash, you might get like $2 or $3 back to your wallet. Like, is it like a cash back type thing?
I experienced this
That
with Ian Freeman in Keene when I went out there. I'm going out tomorrow and did Free Talk Live, and he took me to a bar afterwards and showed me this. It's really cool, this Dashback thing.
Yeah. So it's going to be a crypto heavy spot, and pretty much every single merchant at PorkFest is going to be taking cryptocurrency. And if they don't, well, shame on them. They're not getting any of my business. I'm giving out $20 in free Dash to people when I set up their first Dash wallet. Only costs you a selfie. So sorry if you don't think you look good. I think you look fine. And just go and have fun and spend all kinds of stuff. If you want, you can just go shapeshift it to Dogecoin and just ask one of these places to take Dogecoin, and AnyPay will support that too. But I mean, obviously, if you want the real digital cash experience, you should probably be using Dash.
Awesome. Thank you for coming on, man. Joel
Anytime.
Valenzuela, dashforcenews.com. Go and check him out at the Desert Links on Twitter. Thank you so much for coming on, and we'll have you on again soon. I'll see you at PorkFest, man.
Absolutely.
All
Thanks
right, dude.
again.
See you later. Bye bye. So, Christian, were you able to hear any of Joel? Oh, wait, I've got him muted. Hold on. Now I have you muted, Christian. There you are. Were you able to hear him or no? Did I get the audio right? Christian?
Yeah, I heard him.
You heard
He
him.
was there we go.
Good.
I heard it.
Good.
I picked it up.
Good. Good to know. I didn't know whether I had that audio signal right. So, dude, interesting stuff. I think it's a good sign that we're reaching a place where now we're actually starting to talk about merchant adoption, talking about using this in real life. It's only in using it that the subtle kinks and the bugs become obvious. It's
Yep.
Linus's law again, man. You got to have a lot of eyeballs for the bugs to be shallow. So, we're at the end. We're at the end. It went by super fast, dude.
Yeah, it went quick, dude.
Yeah, that was a fast one, but a very good one. Thank you for everything today, dude. It looks like we've got
Thank you.
most of the technical issues worked out.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
Pretty
running
smooth.
smooth now. Definitely a lot smoother than last week, that's for sure.
So yeah, man, I'm sure that there will be more on these topics to talk about probably in the next week. I forgot to ask you, how did the meetup go?
Oh, actually, so I had to cancel it. I
Oh,
contacted everybody that was coming in from the meetup and everybody that we knew that was coming in because the Vegas Golden Knights hockey game.
oh, that's
The
right. And
venue,
George
the
is
venue.
not, yeah, George is like all about the distillers, all about the Vegas Golden Knights. I saw he had posted something that was like, when I was in Hungary and the national team played, nobody worked, and now that I'm in Vegas and the Golden Knights are in the Stanley Cup Finals, I'm not working or something like that. So okay, well that's great for George. I'm sure but you're doing it again next month, right?
Yeah, absolutely,
Okay,
for sure.
awesome, dude. Well, thank you for today. Let me say goodbye to the people. Well, thank you for tuning in today. Once again, I'm glad that the show turned out the way that it did, and I hope that it was informative. This is a conversation that we really have to continue on if we, as liberty lovers, really want to take Satoshi's vision and the vision of Bitcoin and cryptocurrency and use it as the tool that it was always meant to be to free markets, and in doing so, to free people. So I hope those people who are able to make it out, I can't wait to see you at PorkFest. I will be there from when will I be there? From Wednesday to Sunday. I'm speaking actually on Thursday and Friday, but I'll just be hanging out the rest of the time. I'll be there at Rogers Campground, so find me. Let's hang out. Let's talk. Let's go buy some stuff with crypto. I can't wait to see you all. So we will be back, though, next week, same time and same place. And until then, stay free.